Hello, welcome everyone to the Enneagram series. My name is Hayden Lee. I'm a Master Certified Executive Life and Leadership Coach. I am also an accredited Enneagram practitioner and a senior faculty member at Integrative Enneagram Solutions, which is one of the world's top Enneagram schools. And I'm so excited today to be making this video focusing on the centers of expression. And we have some amazing friends and panelists here today talking about their specific center of expression that they may overexpress. And we're going to talk about their centers of expression that they may underexpress and what that means. And what I love about today's session is that most people think the Enneagram is just about 9 types and it's just about your type. And that is so far from the truth because the Enneagram really is a roadmap of self-awareness and a roadmap of development. So landing on your type is actually the easy part, and then learning to use the Enneagram to develop into your best self and the best of your type and to incorporate all the 9 types into you. That's where the work comes in. And the centers of expression is a unique part of the Enneagram that helps us really understand balancing those 3 centers. And the centers of expression are action center, thinking center, and feeling center. And we're going to dive in and talk a little bit more about what that looks like with our guest today. So with that said, I'd love everyone to meet our guests. So welcome, Vanessa, Jamie, and Tujer. We're representing all the centers of expression today. So we'll start with Vanessa. If you could just share with us, who you are and where you're from, and a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My name is Vanessa Mosely. I'm a native of New York City, recently moved to North Carolina, and I love anything in the outdoors, thus the move. And I use coaching and applied functional medicine to support people in living their way out of chronic conditions.
Nice. Cool. Thank you, Vanessa. Welcome.
Thank you.
Jamie?
Hi, my name is Jamie Tracy. I live in Austin, Texas, and I'm a health and wellness coach and a life coach.
Nice. Thank you. Tujer?
Hey, what's going on, everyone? I am Tujer. I am from Chicago, Illinois, Windy City. I work with business leaders who have reached a certain level of success, but still feel like something's missing or still feel like there's some sort of emptiness.
Nice. Cool. Welcome, everyone. So yay, so what are the centers of expression? So like I said, the Enneagram, it's much more than those 9 types that most people are familiar with. But within the Enneagram, we talk about centers of expression. And I already mentioned there's the action center, the thinking center, and the feeling center. And what does that really mean? So the thinking center is the center in us that is about the head, right? It's about thinking and logic and analysis. And then there's the feeling center, which is about the heart, which is emotion and warmth and compassion and empathy and deep, authentic connection with others. And then there's the action center, which is the gut or the body, which is being in tune with taking action and being proactive and being in action and trusting your gut, trusting your instinct. So all 3 centers are within us. But what the Enneagram shows is when you do more Enneagram work, you actually have a stacking of centers of expression, meaning there's one center that is the top center of expression, which is probably could be overexpressed. And then there's a lower underexpressed center of expression, which is like 3rd place, which is the center of expression that you either just don't express or you neglect, you ignore, or maybe you actively avoid that center. But first, let's kind of dive into what it looks like to have each of these centers of expression as your dominant center. So Vanessa, is a thinking center type. I believe with Vanessa stacking, right? It goes thinking, acting, and then feeling, which means her thinking center is dominant, and then there's acting center in the middle, and then feeling center is underexpressed. So tell me about as someone, Vanessa, who has a high thinking center, what's that like for you?
It was kind of an internal joke for a while that of course I'm all very in my head. My primary way to connect with people was to bounce off them almost to find a way out of my head. And so it was kind of a joke, can I borrow your GPS to get out of my head?
Yeah.
And I think there's some other aspect of, I forget what it's called, the types that are either internal or external or something else, but mine is very internal as well. So I think both of those things have made it can be challenging to relate to people in a way that is not overly intellectual. I've noticed that people can often tune out my analysis, and finding the common threads that are easier to connect across can be a challenge.
Wow. Yes, definitely. And what you're speaking of is called the centers of structure, which we're not going to go over too much today, but centers of structure she's referring to the way that energies flow in terms of thinking, acting, and feeling. And for Vanessa, it's all internal, right? Because you have the Vanessa, what's your Enneagram main type, right?
9.
Yeah, so you're a 9. So there's the 9, and then there's the 5, and then there's the 4. So that's a lot of internal energy. Actually, I'm sorry, the 9 is actually more of a confused energy in terms of action, but the 5 is an internal energy for thinking, and the 4 is an internal energy for feeling. Because Vanessa, your tri-type, which we're not talking about today either, but your tri-type is a 9-5-4, which means you act like a 9, you think like a 5, and then you feel like a 4. But yay, I mean, so tell me a little bit about, so even in how you answer was, you needed you needed to take a pause to find your words, to make sure that you were deliberate, in your response, which makes sense because the thinking center types has kind of a cool energy, right? Because they need a second to pause and to slow down and have that spacious mind. So the energy is kind of like a more cool and calm energy. How does that get you into trouble sometimes, being sometimes if you're overexpressing that thinking center?
Exactly like it just did. I really need that moment to understand for myself what I want to communicate. And a lot of times, we live in a culture that moves so fast and so soundbite. And in that space that I need to formulate my thoughts, I lose a lot of people. And because I'm not the quick wit type. And so that space can be challenging to feel and come across as being at the ready and knowing my stuff, and also being clear on the words that I want to use to communicate.
Yeah. What jumped out at me is when you said knowing my stuff, that's actually on your mind, like making sure that you know your stuff. Yeah. Cool.
Right.
Nice. Thank you, Vanessa. So Jamie, tell us a little bit about leading from the feeling center, which I said is the heart center type, being in tune with emotions of others, connection, authenticity, compassion. And like where the thinking center is a more cooler energy, the feeling center is a more warm energy, which makes sense. There's this warmth, connection. So tell us what it's like to have this high expression of feeling center.
Wow. So there's lots of pros to having a high feeling center, and then there is lots of cons as well. So the pros is that I always view circumstances and messages with more of the energy than necessarily the words. So I feel certain things more than I process them. What did they say? I'm like, oh, it didn't necessarily matter what they said. It's how I felt when they were saying it, or how I think they felt when they were intending it. But where I'm conflicted as a type 2 is like, I very much seek others' approval. So a lot of what I feel, there's a huge conflict, and I'm lowest with action, and then medium with thinking is like, I feel a certain way, which is authentic, but then I don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. So I kind of have to repress my feelings and do a lot of back and forth in the thinking of like, how am I going to handle this? Because I don't want to hurt somebody's feelings, but then I can't honor myself. So there's a lot of space I spend in like the thinking center avoiding action because my feelings are contingent upon how others receive me. So there's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, thank you, Jamie, for demonstrating like that's where the richness of the Enneagram system comes into play, because any of the 9 types can have a high feeling center, right? I want to make that clear. Like any of the 9 types could be high thinking center, high action center, high feeling center, right? So, but then you incorporate your core type into it, and that's where it gets interesting, like Jamie is saying. So as a high feeling center type, already, before we learn she's a 2, there's a lot of emotions and being aware of how she feels, how she wants to make other people feel, and being in tune with energy. And then the fact that she's a 2, right, where the 2's motivation is to be liked and appreciated, then there's like a whole swarm of feelings and emotions that come with that, of how you want to make others feel and that you want them to like or appreciate you. And then, if I may ask, since we're on the conversation of 2s, what emotions and feelings come up for you when you don't feel liked or appreciated?
I know we've discussed this before, and I think it's less that I need everybody like me. It's less, my motivation is less that than it is to be disliked. Like I'd rather be anonymous, nobody knows me. I don't want people to dislike me than I need to have everybody like me. But much of me people pleasing and showing up and giving is to have people like me. So my feelings are contingent about how other people receive me. So that's why it's hard for me to take action. It's because I know what I want to do, but then I'm thinking, well, that's not what they want to do. I want it doing the opposite or not honoring myself. So there's a lot of internal conflict because my feelings, I don't own my own feelings. They're contingent upon other people receiving me. So as I've learned about the Enneagram and my habits and my 2, I've started to resolve some of that and take more action. And it's very empowering to resolve some of this, but it's really complex,
Yeah.
Oh, but to answer the question, I don't feel good when people don't like me. It feels awful. And then I spend a lot of time thinking like, well, what should I have done differently? So I do default to the thinking center to process my feelings. Yeah. But acting, no.
Well, no, thank you for sharing that. And I also appreciate that what you said about sorry, it's escaping me. You just said it about okay, I'll come back to me. It was something about what you said about feeling. Oh, I now remember. You said how sometimes you don't even take on your own feelings, right? It's not identify, it's that your feelings are contingent on how others are feeling. And then that's also a very 2 thing in the sense that 2s oftentimes may not know what their needs are. It's easier for them to identify other people's needs. So I'd imagine with the feeling centered 2, it's sometimes like you're able to identify other people's feelings, and then that can influence your own feelings. So.
And it can be very emotionally draining because I absorb other people's energy. So if somebody's like in a bad mood, all of a sudden like my energy like starts to deplete and I feel responsible to turn them around. And I've really kind of had to set some boundaries as I learn more about myself, saying this is unhealthy. They're not necessarily angry at me. I can't control how they feel. And I've had to like mentally kind of put up a barrier to preserve my own energy so it doesn't absorb.
Yeah, nice, cool. Thank you. And acknowledge that the more awareness you have, the more that you're trying to grow and actually learn how to balance the other centers with it, yeah, including action. So cool. Thanks, Jamie. What about you, Tujer? So Tujer has the action center going on. The action center is about the body or the gut, and has more of like a hot energy, right? Where the thinking center is more of a cool energy because it's the head, the feeling center more of a warm energy from the heart, and the action energy can be more of a hot energy because it could be more proactive or initiative, and can be like really decisive or assertive. And just going with the instinct, trusting your gut. It could be impulsive sometimes, but definitely more about trusting your body and moving your body. So tell me how does that show up for you?
Yeah, it's funny because the first thing I think about is I don't feel like I do enough though. And I think that's very typical. Yeah, it's very typical. But when I actually look in hindsight at my life, for those of you that aren't aware of my history, I actually used to be a professional dancer. And it makes sense that I got into dance because when I look at my reason for doing it, it's because it was the only time I could actually get away from my thoughts. It was the only time I didn't have to worry about how I was feeling. I was just moving, and doing cool stuff, I guess you could say, right? Like trying to learn all these cool tricks and moves and stuff. And there's also the idea of there's two different worlds. There's the world of choreography and the world of freestyle. And I was always more in love with the freestyle version of it because I hated the thinking and the needing to remember stuff. So that's how it shows up for me in that area. But outside of the dance world, it shows up in a lot of places too. I'm consistently looking at, what else could I be doing? What else can I get done? What else? What else? And the pro in that, the great thing about that is that I consistently, I guess you could say, look like I'm up to something, right? And the con in that is that I consistently feel like I'm on a hamster wheel because there's no actual, it's like it's like empty action, what I kind of consider like empty carbs. Yeah, sure, they'll fill you up for the moment, but at the end of the day, you don't actually feel any better. And that's kind of what I feel like sometimes. I do all these things and it's like, yes, I feel better for the moment, but at the end of the day, it's just like, what did I really get done? And I think that's where the downfall comes in of, not thinking more thoroughly with some of these things, or, not focusing on how am I actually feeling as I do this and just doing it anyways. So yeah, that's what comes up for me.
Yeah, definitely. And me and you have had conversations before in terms of like taking lots of action, and also what's your relationship with impatience?
Oh yeah, I'm so impatient. Feelings is my lowest, and I see this. I mean, I'll just give you a perfect example that I feel like a lot of people can relate to. Like my girlfriend hates it because every time she'll come to me with something that she's emotionally dealing with, my first instinct is to do something to solve it, right? Or to be like, well, what can you do about it? And she's and then it's a classic. I don't really want anyone to fix it. I just want to be heard. and I have a really hard time with things like that. I have a really hard time with just kind of being with emotion a lot of the time, even my own. And I feel like I might be off tracking a little bit, but I don't know. That's what comes up for me in the way of like my low center there. And sorry, can you remind me really quick what your original question was, just so I don't dive away too far from it?
Oh, I think it was about impatience. Yeah.
Impatience. Yeah. That's really it. I just I get really impatient with emotions. I get really impatient with overthinking. I want to just dive in, and if it's not working, then hey, let me go again. There's this quote that a lot of people, I've been hearing a lot lately. That's measure twice, cut once. And I'm the kind of guy who's going to be like, measure once, cut 50 times, just to find the right piece. So, yeah, so that's definitely the downfall of the impatience there and being action oriented.
Well, actually, let's use that as a great example. So Vanessa and Jamie, so let's say Tujer is your partner, right? And then, either of you are trying to express some sort of, you're sharing something with Tujer. And his immediate response is, well, let's do something about it. Let's take action. So how would that land with you? Jamie? Yeah.
Okay, well, I was formerly married to somebody that I think has a high action center. It sounds similar to you. So I'm actually just curious, do you know if your girlfriend has a high feeling center, or is she just talking this up to like men are from Mars?
Honestly, I wouldn't be able to pinpoint. She's kind of all of it. And I mean, we all are in some way, shape, or form, right? But yeah, I wouldn't be able to just guess, to be honest with you.
So I'm also kind of like crafty and impulsive, so I might cut 50 times too. But regarding my feeling center, I'm very process oriented over results. So in relationship with somebody that's like actually action oriented, and it doesn't matter what the process is like, there was sometimes a lot of conflict. in the way in which things got done. And at the end, it would always be like, well, it got done. I'm like, but it wasn't a fun process because it was stressful, or you were critical, or you did it wrong. And I want like the whole process, because I'm a feeling center. I want everybody to be happy. Like, I wouldn't want to win the football game if we didn't play all the players, right? Like, I don't care about the win if not everybody's feelings were honored. So.
Yeah, that's a great. What about you, Vanessa?
I would freak out a little bit, only because you can't, okay, great, but not without a plan. There are so many things we need to consider before we jump onto the highway. And I need to make sure that we've fully considered them.
Yeah. So interesting, right? It's so different, because like Tuesday would be like, all right, well, let's do something about it now. And then Jamie's like, well, we need to consider how we feel about this. And then Vanessa's like, well, we need to make a plan and make sure that we know all the details. And so, which actually, brings up this idea of each center has intelligence, meaning all of you have intelligence in your brain, in your heart, and in your gut, in your body. So having an overexpressed feeling center, thinking center, and action center, it's about balancing all three centers. And we call it the fourth way, is balancing all three centers, but also using all three centers in the most intelligent way, right? Because you could be having a activated feeling center, but it could totally be unhealthy expressions of the feeling center, or unhealthy expressions of the feeling center, thinking center, and action center, right? So we're talking about being able to start becoming aware of when your feeling center or thinking center or action center is overactivated, and maybe it's you're doing it in an unhealthy way. So you want to balance it with your least expressed center of expression. So it's like you raise that least center of expression to counterbalance your overexpressed center, but to do it in a way so there's intelligence in all the centers. And what do I mean by intelligence? It means an intelligent body center or action center is feeling alive yet grounded, taking intentional action. And how does one take intentional action? It's through checking in with your feeling center and your thinking center, right? A thinking center, a highly intelligent thinking center, means being able to, yes, analyze and be objective, but also tuning into your heart, making sure that it aligns with who you are and what you really want, and also making sure that you take action in a timely manner and execute on your thoughts, execute on your ideas. Like, that would be an intelligent thinking center. And then an intelligent feeling center would be, yes, being in tune with your emotions and the emotions of others, but also in a way that doesn't overwhelm you, paralyze you, maybe being oversensitive or overreacting to things that weren't personal, right? To be able to balance the feeling center with analysis, objectivity, right? Seeing things without emotion, seeing things as they are rather than how you feel. And then, of course, also being able to take action and follow through. So do you see how each center can evolve, right? So it's not merely as, well, if I have a high feeling center, then I'll just work on my thinking center. Yes, but also we want to be intelligent feeling center, an intelligent thinking center, and an intelligent action center. So how does that land with all of you? What comes up for you when I say that?
I think what's coming up for me is the distinction between, Jamie and Tuja both mentioned how, despite having one very dominant center, how they both are still utilize the other centers. And that's certainly been true for me too. I got into personal training and fitness as a break from my relentless overthinking. And I do very much use my emotional realities as a guide when logic doesn't seem to be doing the trick. But through all of that, the distinction of, oh, okay, yes, those may be very real parts of our internal world, but how are they being expressed? The expression is the key, not so much the internal experience.
Yeah. Do you mind, I thought it was funny when you shared with us in our other coaching group is like, how do you identify when you have emotions and how do you, that thing you use? Do you mind sharing?
How do I did well, often for me, when I notice it because it's super intense. It's not like I don't have a very intense emotional world. I do experience that, but in terms of, I don't remember exactly what
Well, I think it was specifically like I think I asked you, how can you name your emotions or how can you label them? And then I think you said you had to use a feelings wheel to actually learn
Oh,
what,
yeah.
which I thought was kind of funny. But like, were you being serious or was that like a joke?
No, I was totally serious.
Okay.
So my emotion, I do have the very intense emotions, which are obvious, and of course I identify those because it's pretty unmistakable. But if I'm not having one of those moments and somebody randomly asks me how I feel, I do need to pull out a feelings wheel, and that one is just true.
So I'm going to ask you like a kind of a hard question. How do you distinguish between thinking a feeling and feeling a feeling?
That's such a good question. Language really fails me at this moment, but a part of it certainly is that I can identify some thought patterns that correspond to a feeling. Like per se, confused is a feeling that will be mirrored in my thought pattern, right? But then I also have learned to identify a more, the more emotional texture of different feelings. So I'm getting better at drawing that distinction, but it takes a lot of feelings wheels stashed around.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you for being a good sport with that tough question. It is a tough one. I don't even know how I may be able to articulate that, but it's interesting how with thinking center types, sometimes when you ask them, what emotions are you feeling? They answer with, I think, I feel, or I think this, and it can be difficult. And oftentimes, I think even in our sessions before too, where I'm like, no, that wasn't an emotion, but I asked you, what emotion are you experiencing? And you said that you're thinking about this or something like that. So it's just interesting, right? Because that's our default. Our high center of expression is the kind of our default, our go-to. Yeah. Yeah, Jamie?
Vanessa, I find this so fascinating because sometimes we forget that others don't like see or feel the way we innately are. And I feel so much, and sometimes I don't even know what I'm feeling because like there's a disconnect with the thinking. So when I'm feeling big things, then sometimes I have to actually, instead of feel the feeling, I have to actually think the feeling. And when I can name it, then I can help resolve whatever needs to take place like mentally before I can actually take an action. But before that, I feel so much that I can just be so overwhelmed and shut down. And until I name that feeling and think it, like put it into words, like it's just not even useful, right?
Yeah.
That's really fascinating. I have the same experience too. Once I can identify it, pull out my feelings wheel and I have a name for it, okay, now things become a little more clear. But yeah, that is a really pivotal choice.
How about you two, Jer, as a high action center and like your feeling center is the lowest. So what's that about?
It's a good question. I don't really know. I know since we've been working together, though, I have been trying to pay more attention to the emotions. Actually, it's funny that Vanessa brings up the feelings wheel. Like just earlier today, while going through this Enneagram thing, I was like, maybe that would actually help too, just to like actually have a visual to pinpoint. But yeah, I've noticed for myself, I have two types of feelings. It's either good or bad. Like that's it. Like how are you feeling? Good. How are you feeling? Kind of bad, but like that's and I don't know what that's about.
Yeah.
But my assumption is that it's like as a doer, as an action oriented person, it's like there's no time for feelings. you know there's just it's just result, and then you can feel after that. You can feel happy after you accomplished it. Yeah. So I imagine that's probably what that's about.
Well, what's super interesting though, Tujer is actually the Enneagram Four, right? And the Enneagram Four actually, their motivation is, to be unique and authentic. And fours actually are passionate about their emotions. So the emotions are all there. There's deep emotions, and fours are passionate about emotions. But kind of how you're showing what you express in the world is not about emotion. It's about action. And something interesting you said actually earlier about the feeling of riding on a hamster wheel, and it kind of got me thinking about. But when you're on the hamster wheel, even though you're taking a lot of action, it may not be productive action, right? It might not be effective action, yet you're still running away from maybe your feelings.
Hmm.
Because
Yeah.
always keeping busy, then you don't need to slow down and actually tune in to what it is that actually really you need to tune into. Yeah. How's that land with you?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense actually. Like I mentioned before, I was a professional dancer, and between becoming a professional dancer and being a coach, I had to give up my career to be home for my sick dad. And I was like, I fell into a state of depression, right? And like kind of an early midlife crisis. And a big reason for that was because, every time I had danced, the reason why I loved it so much, it was actually kind of a toxic relationship. I was using it as a form of escapism. Yeah. And I was using it, I used to pride myself in being able to dance till like 5 or 6 in the morning, and then like, no rest and whatnot, because I thought it was hard work. But really what I realized is the only reason why I did that was because if I didn't, then I was staying up late thinking about my, what was going on in my head, and feelings all sorts of ways. And after I put dance aside, it was like all these feelings that I had ignored, all of these, I guess you say, inner demons that I never confronted, kind of came rushing in, like 15 or 16 years worth of it, came rushing in at one moment. And I didn't really have, the dance, the action of dance to run away with, like use it to run away anymore. So yeah, so it definitely lands. And even nowadays, sometimes I feel like, I have to be very strategic about asking myself, like, am I doing this because I'm running away from something, or am I doing this because I'm running towards something?
Mm.
And having that clear distinction for me helps to make sure that I'm not just using action as a form of escape, again, from either the feelings or the thoughts, or whatever it might be.
Yeah. And that's so fascinating. And it makes sense that you have a high action center and as a dancer, because that's about getting into your body, right? Action, getting in touch with your body, like being in tune with your body. But it sounds like in this particular instance, well, you said to get into your body to get out of your head, and I'll
Mhm.
add to that, it's you got into your body to get away from your heart,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So I want to make that distinction too, that yes, you're getting out of your head, but also getting out of your heart, right? Because you being so into your body, you are building that body intelligence, but then at the expense of your heart intelligence. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's funny because, like, when you follow something like that, most people are thinking, oh, you're doing it from the heart because it's your passion, it's whatever. But really, I mentioned earlier, it became toxic for me because I realized it was a passion, yes, but it was more so of like an addiction. It was something to numb the
Yeah.
feelings. Like it wasn't all the time that I would dance and I would feel very good about it. More times than not, I would actually like be super critical and be like, how can I be better at this? It wasn't because it was there were hardly any times when I was like, I'm doing this just because I feel like it. Which is interesting, and nobody caught that, because when you say, "Hey, I'm a professional dancer," they're just thinking that's your passion, that's your heart, So no one called me out
Yeah.
on it. And unfortunately, I had to learn it the hard way, but here we are, right?
Oh, cool. It's fascinating. Yeah. Thank you, Tujer. Well, I mean, as we begin to wrap up this like awesome conversation about centers of expression, I want us to take a second to think about maybe our final thought for all of you is to share, what are you currently working on, in order to balance those three centers more? What does that look like for you? And how do you want it to go to have a more balanced expression of thinking, acting, and feeling? And what would you and what are you putting out into the world of how that's going to go for you and how you want that to look like? So who wants to share?
I guess I'll go.
Well, no, Vanessa's
Oh,
ready. Vanessa, and then Tushar, yeah. But I appreciate that proactive, instinctual action. So,
I am, laugh away, but the feelings wheel is truly useful. And so, as a step one, to kind of become more aware of what I am actually feeling and having it feel a little less foreign to be in touch with it on a more regular basis, with the goal of being able to express what is going on with me a little bit more often and a little bit more clearly. Because it definitely impacts my ability to be genuine and to form powerful relationships.
and then when you do that, balancing that out with your thinking center, how do you think how's that partnership going to look with the healthy feeling center and healthy thinking center?
That might be a little bit beyond me right now, but I feel like, I mean, I think if I'm expressing it more, I feel like the thinking center is just always going to be there. It's a question of if I can bring the emotional part up enough to be an adequate balance.
Yeah.
See.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks, Vanessa.
Thank you.
Tushar?
We've talked about this before too in our own conversations, and what I'm up to now, I guess, is actually putting away work, and not being attached to how can I get more clients, how can I get more marketing done, more sales calls, more whatever, right? Letting go of the results with that and just saying, what is it that I've wanted to do that I've kind of been putting off? What is it that would actually make me happy and I feel alive about, but I haven't been doing because I've been thinking about results more than I've been thinking about what actually makes me excited. So with that said, I'm using like the rest of 2020 to just take off of like business completely. And, I have a whole podcast coming out just because I love having conversations and being able to share that information with the world. I'll be helping my mom build up her own like online clothing store because that's something I've put off for a long time. Just because it's like, hey, I need to focus on my business first. Helping my girlfriend with her nonprofit, and learning a bunch of other stuff like neurolinguistic programming, learning neuroscience, just because it brings me like joy to learn more and grow more. So that's that's what I'll be up to for the next, I guess, month and almost a half.
Yeah. So it sounds like it's not that you're taking off from taking action, but it's more about taking more intentional action. Action. So it's like, stopping at your heart first to tune in to make sure that it's something that it sounds like energizes you, that you're passionate about. And it even sounds like being an opportunity to have a deeper connection with your girlfriend and with your mom, if, do some stuff with them. So it's like kind of like including your heart in what actions you want to take. That's what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah, and a lot of it is based off of the question. I ask myself new prompts every day, and I've been kind of tailoring them to the emotional side, like rather than hey, what can I get done today? What's the result I want to accomplish by whatever, right? I've been asking more questions like how can I love more people today? How can I be the reason why someone else feels grateful today? Something like that. And that's really driven my action to be more purposeful and fulfilling, rather than just what are the results? What are the results? And that's actually how I came up with everything that I mentioned I wanted to do for the rest of 2020. It's still action oriented. It just fulfills on a purpose that's deeper than results for the sake of results.
Yeah. I love that. It's a good question for both you and Vanessa. Maybe asking yourself regularly, how do I want to feel today?
Mm-hmm.
And what actions can I follow through with to feel that way?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So what about you, Jamie?
Notice how I went last because I hate action.
Yeah.
No, I think I can get overwhelmed by feelings easily. And the positive feelings are great. That's always my navigation compass to let me know that I'm on track and I'm honoring myself and doing what's right. And in a perfect world, I can do that and make others happy and there's no problems. But the world doesn't work like that. So typically when I'm feeling negative emotions, it's because I have not honored my own boundaries, or I'm putting other needs ahead of my own. So there's the conflict that I have then, which becomes intellectual, which is the thinking, like, I know what I have to do. That's my gut, my action center, but I don't want to do it. And I spend a lot of time, space, and emotions, feelings, avoiding conflict. And that for me is kind of why I look negatively upon action in my situation, not from the lens that Toujours or Vanessa look at it, but like usually the actions I don't want to take, I'm overwhelmed with, like riddled with guilt of not wanting to hurt somebody, but not honoring myself. So for me, it's just, I really need to prioritize like what's most important to me and why I put other people's feelings over mine. And then just have to take action. And if I have to deal with the ramifications of hurting somebody else, like I just have to own that, and a lot of this goes back to childhood where you didn't necessarily like have the gall to stand up for yourself. Now I'm an adult and, I have children and a job. So I just have to be a grown up, and act. And that's hard for me sometimes. But it gets easier the more I work on myself and the more I step into what my priorities are and what I can and can't handle. And so yeah, just like giving myself a little more grace that it's okay. If not everybody's happy, it's okay. If you can't do it all, it's okay to say no, and it's okay to set boundaries and enforce them.
Yeah, I love that. It's like the boundaries take actions. And then if the boundaries that you set, affect someone else's emotions, but what we talked about is like, but it's not your responsibility for how they're feeling, right? Because remember you talked about how it's hard for you to identify your own feelings because you take on their feelings, but their feelings are their feelings, your feelings are your feelings. And then the boundaries is the action that you need to take sometimes.
I waste a lot of energy and emotions and thoughts knowing I have to do something, but putting it off and dreading it. And it's so much wasted capacity of mine. Or if I just like could figure it out, like it's gonna hurt in some way, it's gonna hurt them, it's gonna hurt me, but I have to do it. I should do it earlier than later because then I just wasted so much time,
Yeah.
And it usually turns out to be totally fine if I say no.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. Well, Jamie, I know how you feel, and Vanessa, I know how you think, and Toujours, I totally know how you act. So I'm with you all. Well, thank you. I mean, this was really cool to really see the contrast between, thinking center, action center, and feeling center. Thank you three so much. And for viewers, thank you for watching. If you're watching this on YouTube, please go ahead and subscribe or like the video. You can check out more of my work at haydenlee.com. That's HAYDENLEE.com. And I also have Enneagram groups that run throughout the year. So if you're interested in those, go ahead to my website, haydenlee.com, and check out my Enneagram group and click on that. So once again, go ahead and unmute yourselves, you three, and let's share some love and say goodbye to everyone. Thank you so much for everyone. I really enjoyed hearing all the centers of expression. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you everyone for sharing.
Thanks everyone. Good to meet you.
Definitely
Yeah.
from this conversation.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Bye.